Hello, hello, and welcome to Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. I'm your host, Amanda, and my awesome co host is.
Hello, I'm Megan.
Hey, hey. So, together, we are your source for authentic homeschool discussion. Our goal is to provide real insights into our homeschooling lives. We both love homeschooling and we love our respective kiddos, but we will never pretend that every day is sunshine and rainbows or that we are perfect because we definitely aren't. Some days are hard, some days it's just messy. And I don't mean in a sticky fingers kind of way, right? There are times we don't show up as our best selves. And, we have to apologize to our kiddos and we have to take ownership of that. It's just what it is. So here you can expect the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Yeah, we aren't about the glossy version that some influencers are out there portraying. Those people are pushing aside a big pile of laundry and junk mail that's on the counter. And then they go on there and they film their TikToks where they show you that they're super on top of everything in life. And even though you know deep down that that's what they're doing, it's still easy to watch that and come away thinking like, man, they have it all together and I'm really failing my kids. And so we are not about that vibe here at all.
Yep. I think that I recently noticed a couple influencers that I follow have taken pictures of their clean living space or workspace and turned that into their background so that the vast majority of time when they're filming and it looks like they're just in their regular living room or their regular kitchen, it's actually
Stop
like
it.
their counter or their table and then the background screen. And I was like, oh, I mean, I suppose work smarter, not harder, but
Right.
not real, right?
Well, that's it, right? But again, like how obsessed with you are this image of perfection to put out there, right?
Mhm.
Oh my gosh, that's bananas. That
Yep.
is bananas.
Yep. All right. So one of the other things that you're going to find here is we're not about that ridiculousness of like, hey, we found this great science curriculum that isn't heliocentric and totally offers daily devotionals with each lesson. No. Okay. So we are secular and progressive. Our podcast is secular and progressive. We like our science based on actual facts, peer reviewed, reproducible. Yeah, we're not into the fairy tale and conspiracy theory based science.
Not really, right? So if you're new to the podcast, you'll soon find that we homeschool quite differently. I am a loosey goosey unschooler, and Amanda is a hardcore curriculum loving secular academic homeschooler. So we agree to disagree quite a bit in our conversations here. We do line up sometimes. It's not to say we're always on the opposite end of the spectrum. We do line up sometimes, but we definitely are like, yeah, I won't be doing that plenty of times. One area you will find we never do this agree to disagree thing is on human rights, right? It is not a place where we budge. We sincerely affirm that trans rights are human rights. Black Lives Matter, my body, my freaking choice. No human can be illegal on stolen land, and just so much more. So that is us.
Yeah, absolutely. If you've been searching for a homeschool community where you don't have to suffer through the conspiracy theories and filter out the Jesus just to fit in, you have found us. We are here and we're so glad you're here. All right. So today we're going to be talking about reluctant readers. Oftentimes within the homeschool community, you hear about parents with just absolutely ravenous readers and overflowing bookshelves. But the reality is that is not a universal truth, okay? Not all homeschoolers have kids who are always stuck with their nose in a book and that they have hundreds and hundreds of books that they just can't wait to read or that they're always rereading. That is not what is happening. So, what happens when you have a kiddo who doesn't love reading? If you're stressing about how to get them reading or tired of what feels like that never ending push pull to get a book in their hands, like stick around, have a listen. We've definitely got some thoughts and ideas for you. But before we get into that, we do like to start every episode with a weekly check in. It is part of our effort to keep things real and show the fact that we're not using fake backgrounds. Like some of our weeks are great and some are epic fails. And either way, we're going to share it with you. Okay. So, how's your week been, Megan?
if I was using a fake background, it wouldn't be the meeting room sign and the handicapped push button for the door to the meeting room at all.
Well,
So
I would like to point out, if you're watching live, I took down the mop and the broom that normally hang on this wall behind me just because they were really brightly colored and a little distracting. So also no fake background.
exactly. So I've had a good week. I will start out by saying we are in South Florida right now. We're in Miami, sorting out our storage unit, which has kind of been a phased approach. I do have to say, if you ever decide to blow up your life and move to another country, putting your stuff in storage for months is actually really helpful before you decide what you're going to bring. Because you find stuff in there that you're like, I forgot I even had this, or why on earth did I save this? And so we did an initial pack of stuff to go to Portugal early in January, and now we're doing our final one. And so each time there's been a gap between myself too, but also the kids seeing their stuff. It's like, go toss, 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 right? So
Mhm.
it has helped us slim things down. So, but we're staying in a Marriott right near our storage unit for a couple of days while we get that sorted. And the Wi-Fi here is terrible. So I am recording at one of those cheesy computers that they have in the lobby where you can print out your flight documents or whatever. And I'm right near the entrance to where the housekeeping staff is. So there's going to be plenty of yelling in the background when they come in and out and don't realize that I'm sitting here recording something. So it's been fun trying to find a quiet place to work that has decent internet this week, but it is what it is. But our week's been good. We were in Texas last week, or today's Saturday. So I guess that's still this week. I don't know. We were in Texas for our big immigration appointment that I had mentioned before, and that went really, really smooth. So that feels good to have that off my plate. Now it's just kind of like a waiting game for the response from the embassy. But the person who processed all of our paperwork was like, you have everything looks great, blah, blah, blah. So that made me feel a little bit better. So
Yay.
I know, right? That feels good. So yeah, so we're in Florida for the next week. And then we're going to Aruba, which is where my husband works and lives. And we haven't seen him since October. Oops. So we're going to go down there and like actually let him see his kids for a while. We've been gallivanting the world and he's been off working. So we're going to do that next week. But I get to have dinner with my best friend tonight. She's lost both her mom and her mother in law in the last 6 months to the day. And she's been with her husband since high school. So her mother in law really was like a second mother to her. That just happened 5 days ago. So we're going to go out and get dinner tonight and probably laugh and probably cry and definitely get in a hug and all that. So I'll be happy to see her. But yeah, overall, it's been a pretty good week. Lots of productive stuff happening and, hanging out here in the Marriott lobby. So how's your week been, Amanda?
Yeah. My week has been okay. I had mentioned a few weeks ago on the show that I was doing another one of those heart monitor things where you have to wear it for a few weeks and they track everything that's going on. And so to that end, I knew that it was getting close to the time to take it off. And I had committed to causing myself some issues while I was wearing the heart monitor to make sure that they read the bad days and the issues where things got really wonky. I have dysautonomia and a few other things going on. And so I had a really busy weekend last weekend full of things that would normally be fun, but would also normally be spread out like one thing a week. And I did like 4 or 5 of them all in a 2-day window to make sure that I really got all of the ups and downs of what's happening in my life, which then, of course, meant like I had a couple of downs in bed, which always makes things challenging. Monday and Tuesday as well, and bleeding into Wednesday, like trying to homeschool from bed when I'm the one that's kind of bedridden and not doing very well, it gets really challenging, right? And my kiddo is definitely happy to be like, "Hey, we don't need to do any work." And I'm like, "Well, you're not the one that's sick. So actually, yeah, we do need to, like I'm all for him taking mental health days and sick days and things like that, but it was not his. And if we took them anytime I wasn't feeling well, the kid wouldn't learn hardly anything, right? Like that's sort of that whole chronic illness thing. So yeah, we had some struggles there. We had one day that went really, really poorly. And then we sort of got a little bit back on track. And, we're doing that weird thing. We've talked about it before, but in our house, we do sort of homeschool year round, but we definitely take it easier in the summer. And we have a lot of other different projects and things going on. We'll do some unit studies, specifically the ones that we put out because we don't have time to do those during the school year. So we do those over the summer for fun and we kind of keep up on our math and things like that. But there's still that push pull of like, well, a lot of, his cousins are done with school, friends have kind of ended or they're wrapping up and different programs and things that he's in, they have their end of year party and then he has to like come home and get right back into like a full school schedule. So it's been a little challenging, I'm not going to lie. And then on top of all of that, it's a 3-day weekend. We have Monday off for Memorial Day. That's when we're recording this episode, on that weekend, rather, not on the Monday. And then Tuesday, we'll have a regular school day. And then Wednesday, we're driving to Palm Springs for my birthday, like a little getaway. So, like, next week's going to be a mess, too. Like, it's just, you know, flexibility is a good thing, but sometimes it makes things a little challenging too when you're like, hey, we can do this. Hey, we can do that. And we've talked before, my kiddo really does best with a routine, a schedule. And so the kind of constant fluctuation is making things a little challenging.
Hmm. Yeah, I can see that for sure.
Yeah. But in any event, today we are here and we're going to talk reading. Okay. So we started out this episode talking about how we never want you to walk away from an episode here of Homeschool Moms Unfiltered thinking that you're failing at homeschooling, failing your kids, or just generally sucking at life, right? Like, we do not want you to feel that way. I think it is pretty common in the homeschool world to hear about kids who just live with their heads in books. They read hundreds of books a year. They choose reading over playing outside. And man, if you have a kiddo who doesn't love reading, I think it can really do a number on you. It can really make you feel like you're not doing it right or that you're failing.
Hmm. And I don't know about you, but for me, when I'm in that position where I'm stressing and panicking, I make my worst decisions and I communicate poorly and all, right? Because you're acting from a place
Uh-huh.
right, this panic as
Mhm.
opposed to logic.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
all right. But we also told you we keep it real. We are not ones to present a fake image around here. So we're going to be honest. We both have readers
Mhm.
in different way, right? My kids, I have 3 kids. I think I have one who's probably most similar to the way your kid is, just based upon what I know about him from our endless hours of podcasting. But then I have 2 other kids, and they both consume content very differently as well. So different. And we are going to talk quite a bit about that today also. But please don't discount our thoughts on the subject just yet. Be like, well, what could they possibly know? Their kids actually like reading. We promise, we have valid thoughts. I'm pretty confident we can share support and ideas during today's episode that will be beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I have said it here before and I'll say it again. I despise read alouds. I know in a lot of circles that means my homeschool card gets taken away, but I despise read alouds. Okay. When my kiddo was little, he didn't particularly enjoy me reading books to him. He would much rather sit silently and flip through books by himself, which honestly was good because I didn't particularly enjoy reading books aloud to him. So to this day, we both hate when an assignment specifically says to read a story or book out loud. We try because we're those kinds of people. It happened just last week. We do Hearth and Story, which I think is an excellent, I think it's a really great ELA, but they had this short story for a novel study. It was like, read this story out loud. And it's like 5 pages, single spaced. And we started and we got through like 1.5 pages. And I was like, "This is so dumb." And he was like, "It is. Can we please stop?" I was like, "Yes, you just read it and I'll read it and then we'll talk about it once we're done reading it." We just don't like it. Okay. And it's that other, like just kind of keeping in mind that people do things differently, right? We talk all the time about how our kiddos are twice exceptional. Both Megan and I have twice exceptional kids. And one of the things you hear often is this early reading. So often, especially with gifted kids, you hear parents talking about, like, oh, well, my 3-year-old started reading by himself. I didn't have to teach him at all. Okay, listen, my kiddo was not reading anything that looked like a real book until well after his 6th birthday. If you are one of those gifted parents listening and you're thinking, my gifted kid didn't start reading on his own at 3, so maybe he isn't really all that gifted, please don't do that. These are all things. Kids have different timelines. Families have things that work for them and things that don't work for them. We're going to talk about all kinds of different things, okay? It's really It's okay. And kids look different, and don't discount them because of one thing, whether that's when they started reading or whether or not they like to read novels or whether they'll only read nonfiction or whether they'll only read a podcast or an audiobook. There's so much the picture is so big. The story is so much bigger than one data point. Please don't do that.
Yeah, I can echo that completely because I have the kid who taught himself how to read, right? And it was hilarious because then when I went to teach the second kid, I thought I taught him to read, okay? Because we did, we're unschoolers, so it wasn't like I had like this whole color coded system and textbooks like Amanda would have, right? But like, we would watch like Letter Factory and we would do stuff, right? So he starts reading. I'm like, oh, taught the kid to read. Excellent. Then we get to the second kid, did the exact same thing, came to find out I didn't freaking teach that kid how to read at all because the second one, we'd be reading those infernal Bob books at night and it would be like, she'd be stuck on every freaking page. And she'd be like, to, and I'm like, it's in my head, of course, obviously, because I'm a gentle parent. And in my head, I was like, it's been the on every fucking page for the last 8 pages, right? And like,
Yeah.
I don't drink, but I thought about taking it up while she was learning to read. And that's when I figured out I did not teach the first kid how to read, right? But then my third kid, who actually testing wise is my, on paper, if we're going to go that way, on paper is my most gifted child. He taught himself to read, but same thing, 6, 7-ish, right? Was kind of his sweet spot. And I was like kind of starting to get to that point of worrying as an unschooler where I was like, and I know there's unschoolers with people whose kids are like 12, 13, 14, and they're still figuring, and that's just not our style of unschooling, but no judgment. I was getting to the point where I was starting to be like, is this going to click? Is this really going to work? And then all of a sudden it was like, boom, and he got it, right? So yeah, I can totally do that. So yeah. And to this day, that kiddo can't physically hold and read a book because his ADHD has surged so badly in his tween and teen years that the ability to sit down and hold a book is just not physically possible for him at this point in life. So maybe that'll change, but for now it's not so much.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So let's dig in. I mean, let's start with the reality of the situation, right? Kids are
Yeah.
just little versions of human beings, right? They're just little versions of adults. Not every adult is a reader. Not every kid is going to be a reader. Not every kid is going to be a natural bookworm. That is totally okay. Your child's love of reading is not a moral virtue that we tie their worth to in this world.
Well,
It's
we
okay.
shouldn't.
Yes,
Right?
we shouldn't.
That's it. I think too often people do, but we would argue that you shouldn't be tying their their moral virtue to their interest, love of reading, like
Mhm.
either one.
Yeah, completely. When in doubt, if you need just like a little consolation, bear in mind that according to the internet, even the silver fox, smarty pants, Anderson hot stuff Cooper didn't become a reader until he was an adult. So there's no clock on learning to read or developing a love for reading. Either way is
Mhm.
true. You can become a reader. I became a reader as an adult because the crap books they assigned in school sucked. And I hated them. Right. And I thought all books sucked like that. And then when I figured out there were good books out there and when you got to pick them yourself, I was like, oh, I like reading actually. I mentioned we're going to dinner tonight with my best friend and her husband picked the place because his mom passed away the other day. And it was like, let's try to cheer him up. You pick the restaurant. And it's a great restaurant, but you have to get there. It's Miami on a Saturday night, right? Like
Yeah.
we need to be there early. And I was like, I volunteered. I was like, I have a good book. I'll show up like an hour and a half early. I'll put our name on the list and I'll just sit and read my book, you know? So, but as if you told me 14-year-old me that I just volunteered, you'd be like, yeah, I don't think so. So yeah, it's possible.
Yeah, well, and the thing is it can totally vary in families too. I have always been a reader. I have never particularly enjoyed assigned reading. When I was in university, I was in a course study where I had very few textbooks that I had to read. I actually enjoy reading textbooks. I know that makes me weird, but I didn't get very many textbooks to read. We had a lot of novel type books or like those style of books. So even like our political science classes and things like that would be 8 to 10 novels that you had to read. And every class had this like 8 to 10 novels that you had to read a quarter because we were on a quarter schedule. And it was an obscene amount of books. And I didn't like them. I have always been a reader. I've read all kinds of other books. I just hated the assigned reading that I had constantly. But even though I absolutely love reading, I married a man who is not a reader. Like, he would never just be like, "Hey, I think I'm gonna pick up a book to take on the airplane." Like, that would not happen.
No,
Um,
mine either.
yeah, and for some people, it's just not a thing. Now, in the time that we have been together, he has become more and more interested in audiobooks or specific good kinds of books. And I think that's a huge part of it, right? We'll talk about this a little later on. But the first time I gave him a book, I gave him Trevor Noah's Born in Crime, and he was like,
So
"Oh,
good.
this is really good." Like, yes, right? Like, books don't have to be awful. And now he screens all of the graphic novels that I'm not positive about giving our kiddo because I don't enjoy reading those kinds of books. It is not a good time for me, but my husband is more than happy to read through them and be like, "Yeah, I didn't see anything in there that was like too worrisome or that'll give him nightmares." And so, like you can find that balance. It's not, yeah, it's just not, the whole point is it's not one thing or the other, right? This is not black and white. And if you have a kiddo who isn't a reader, I really doubt that it is going to be as black and white as they hate books and they will never read. I think this is one of those things where maybe you need to deschool yourself a little on what reading actually is and be open. Let's open our minds a little.
Mhm.
Okay. So I'll get off my soapbox for the time being. Let's be real. This whole episode is probably going to be me jumping on a soapbox. And so if we're actually going to take some time and really dig into the root causes, right? One of the big things could be, often is, neurodivergence and learning differences. It doesn't matter if it's something as obvious as dyslexia, where we're like, oh, dyslexia, obviously not so easy to read a massive novel. It could be something like ADHD. Meagan mentioned before that her ADHD kiddo has an especially hard time holding a physical book and getting through a big old physical book like that. Not because he can't read it, right? There are other things at play. Processing disorders, same kinds of thing. Vision issues, right? A lot of times with kids, vision issues just go unnoticed until they get really bad. I my kiddo actually has glasses for reading. He doesn't need them very often, but at the pediatrician, they're always like, "Oh, perfect vision, no problem, perfect vision." And then we were just in a situation where it was like, we have actual like eye insurance. We should take him to see, because my husband has really bad vision and I have very good vision. And so it's like, well, we should just go check because he's around the age where my husband started noticing problems and needed glasses. And the eye doctor was like, huh, he has the exact same eye deformity that my husband has. And he's like, I have seen your husband for years and we have worried about that and wondered if it was a degenerative thing or if there was something else that we needed to be doing about it. They do the special picture of the eyeball to keep track of it and all of this. And then here's my kiddo, 9 years old, exact same eye deformity and almost the exact same condition, place, everything. The eye doctor was like, well, okay, so now we know that it's not degenerative or any of these, like it just is. And so there you go. And we found that my kiddo did actually need eyeglasses for reading. Again, he's young, he's very young, he's got really healthy eyes. And so for him, he can compensate and all of that. The eye doctor was like, look, at some point, he's not going to be able to compensate as well, and he's going to have to wear them more often. But it is hard to catch those things. I had no idea that there was anything going on there. And we had no idea that he had this underlying eye issue that my husband has until we actually went and got an evaluation.
Well, and if I could add, because I had to do that with one of my kiddos. I don't even remember how we got there, but somehow ended up at the eye doctor. And he did the whole read this line, which one's better, number one, number two, like all that stuff, right?
Mhm.
He had him try to track something. This is my oldest. He had him try to track something with his eyes. And when I tell you that his eyes spun around like he'd been hit with a frying pan in a cartoon, like that, like thing.
Yes.
And so there's all sorts of things about tracking disorders and convergence disorders and all that kind of stuff that your kiddo can still pass the picture of a sailboat, picture of a tea mug at the pediatrician's office. And
Mhm.
so, and I get that there's a huge amount of privilege wrapped up in being like, take them to an eye doctor because some asshole decided that teeth and eyes are not part of healthcare and we
No.
should all just pay out our nose for that. So I
Mhm.
get that. But if it's at all possible, if it is something where you're like, there's something up here, I would
Mm.
take them to see a pediatric eye specialist as opposed to just kind of doing the basics or like the Target optical or whatever. And I know that's expensive. I know. But, if you have concerns, it might be something to try and see what resources you can uncover that could help.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think definitely look into what your insurance covers. For us, that was kind of the thing that pushed us into it. Like, well, hey, we can all go get an eye exam. Now, realistically, he can only get new glasses every 2 years. And I don't know a kid who needs glasses who only needs a new pair every 2 years, which is a whole other issue and concern. But it is definitely worth looking into it. And if you can, uh, I'm a big I'm a big believer in like take your kid to a, like Megan said, a good eye doctor, an actual like optometrist who is going to do a full thing. Yeah. I mean, I think you probably picked up on it from talking about this, but the fact of the matter is reading resistance is often, not always, but often a red flag, or at least I don't know what's the flag before red when you're talking about undercurrents and it's not defiance. They're not, the vast majority of the time they're not being jerks. There's something else going on. So just take some time to check it out and rule some of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing to bear in mind is what their reading past is like. So, a lot of people are pulling their kids from school. If you haven't homeschooled from the beginning, what was the culture of reading like at school? Was reading a punishment? Was there forced fluency? Was there shame around reading levels? And listen, I don't think anybody is shaming these kids on purpose about their reading levels. It's just a matter of, you have a room of 20, 25 second graders and you have to sort them somehow. And you can give the groups cutesy names like the bunnies and the whatevers and, all these different animal names. The bunnies still freaking know they're the slow reading group. They
Yes.
still know that they're so what is that psychological experience when it comes to reading? That
Yep.
emotional baggage when it comes to reading is going to matter. Okay. And so kind of digging into that and maybe asking some very gentle questions, and kind of going around that and figuring out what you might be able to do at home to heal some of that before you dive into something else.
Yeah. No, that is so true. I can remember for myself in first grade, I was not put in the top reading group. And I remember being like desperate to try to get into, and they were colors. It was not like these are the advanced readers and these are the middle
Right.
of the road readers. Like it was the brown group and something else. And in no other world would I want to be in the brown group. But in this particular case, I was desperate. And the fact that 40 years later, I remember that I was desperate to get into the brown group shows you just how much that emotional baggage hangs on.
Exactly. Right. Well, and how about too the idea of having to read out loud? I mean,
Oh,
I think that's still happening sometimes in
yeah.
schools. And there's memes that go around targeted at adults about like if you were the kid who counted how many people were reading before you and then counted the paragraphs to try to figure out which paragraph was going to be yours so that you could pre-read it and prepare to avoid embarrassment and make sure you knew all the words and all that kind of stuff. There's clearly some trauma locked up in some of that stuff
Yeah.
if it happened in your kiddo's school and they were embarrassed, they were laughed at, any of that kind of stuff, comments were made. Oh,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
hard.
and then they had no idea what the rest of the reading was because they were so busy trying to make sure that they didn't make a fool of themselves with that. Me being them, they, right? Like I was totally one of those kiddos. I had this kind of stage fright and was very like concerned about doing well. And yeah, I mean, and then you have the like, oh, well, then you didn't get any of the reading. And when the questions are asked and you have the group discussion about like the whole thing, it's just no one means to make reading in school awful, but they accidentally do a lot of times.
Mhm. For
And
sure.
and one of the other things that we talked about at the very top of this episode, but we've talked about it in so many other episodes too, is just the reading culture at home. Do kids see adults reading for fun? Is there joy attached to reading in the home? Do you talk about getting together with friends for a book club? Or do you complain about the fact that you have to read a book for work. What exactly is happening in your home when it comes to reading? Because that matters. Kids, they model the good and the bad. We all know that. I don't think anyone listening to this was like, I actively taught my child to say shit. But they probably said it because you said it too often, right? Every time you stubbed your toe, you said that, and then they said it. Like, they model the good and the bad. Keep that in mind. Also, are audiobooks, graphic novels, magazines, sometimes even things like a podcast, are those treated as real reading in your home? Or do you stick to this like really traditional, conventional idea of reading is to get a paper book and read it? Like, and why? I would really, if you feel that way, I would really encourage you to spend some time thinking about why you feel that way and do a little bit of research and reading up on, get that, reading up on whether or not audiobooks, graphic novels, and magazines, and anything else that you can listen to podcast wise or things like that, whether those are considered reading as well. And if they have the same benefits as reading a paperback book or many of the same benefits.
Hmm. I think too, there's so much ableism locked up in the
Mm,
whole only a physical book is a real book kind of
yeah.
thing, right? That and generally speaking, our crowd is a pretty progressive crowd. So there's something to tap into there too, if you haven't given a thought of that. Like for my child, that's an ableist viewpoint because he physically cannot sit still and hold a book. He
Mhm.
can't not move. And so
Yeah.
yeah, that's how he's made. That's how he
Well, yeah.
works.
And I think too, there's some things to really think about if you're gonna start thinking about those things. For me, I have problems with my hands. It's very challenging for me to hold a book for very long to actually read a paperback book. So I read on my phone very often. And when we're traveling, my kiddo reads on a kid's Kindle. I know Kindle's challenging right now, but it is what it is. But yeah, I read on a Kindle, or my kiddo reads on a Kindle. I read on the Kindle app all of the time when we're reading. It's so much easier than bringing a suitcase of books. But the number of times that we are not in the United States, we're outside of the United States, and he pulls out his electronic device to read, and you get the automatic judgment of like, ugh, on a screen, these Americans, like always on, always playing their games, always on a screen. And there's that lack of like, well, hey, like reading on a screen is still reading, or the headphones and listening. Maybe they're not being insanely rude. Maybe they're enjoying a book. Like, but really that like, yeah, there's a lot to think about there and a lot of different ways to think about it.
Sometimes the audiobooks, in my opinion, are better than the physical book too, because it depends on the storytelling and the accents that they bring into it and stuff like that. Because sometimes I'll listen to an audiobook that I really, really love, and then I'll read the physical book for a book club that I'm leading, like with students. And I'll be like, oh, I loved this book. And then I'll read the physical book because I want to be able to like highlight and make notes and stuff like that. And I find the audiobook was more enjoyable for me. What are you laughing at? What happened?
The first thing that came to mind was the fact that there's this author who writes smut books in Scotland, and I love the audio version because hello, Scottish accent. So much better with a deep male voice than me reading it in my own head.
Yeah,
So yeah,
it's
I'm
so true.
right there with you. Yep.
Yep. They are. Depends on the book. Sometimes it's more enjoyable, sometimes it's not. I had one that I just finished reading not that long ago that everybody raved about this book. I thought it was okay, but the audiobook was terrible. It was set in Germany in World War II. It was read by a Valley girl, and I was just like, what is happening here? And but then I read the physical book, right? So it's like sometimes one's better than the other,
Yeah.
right? Okay, we have more to talk about, but real quick before we continue, wherever you are, can you just like even pause for a second before you forget? Because I know how it is. The episode's going to end and you're going to be like, I'm rushing off to do 10 other things because that's my life. And I totally get it. But if you could just give us a like or a follow, maybe if you're listening and, your mom's been harping on you because your kid's not reading enough, hit the share button, right? Send it, whatever the case is. If you're mom, if you just received, right? Yeah.
Anyone.
Mom, if you just received this subtle message, right? Yeah, right. So I went into something on Spotify the other day And there's all these like green measurement bars of success. And some of them we're doing amazing on. And then some of them I'm like, we're like so far off of the top threshold for some stuff. So like follow, share with a friend. It just helps the podcast reach new people and gain a new audience. And it's all good. So we would truly appreciate it. We enjoy doing the podcast, but it's always validating to see the fruits of your labor when it's, the numbers are there and all that kind of stuff. So we would greatly appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, back to reading. So reframing what counts as reading. We were talking about that right before my little interlude there. Audiobooks, graphic novels, game guides, subtitles. Oh, we are a very neurodivergent household. The subtitles are always on. Web comics, all of that stuff, all are legit. And I think there's kind of this, especially for those of us, right? Like I went to school in the 80s and 90s. We didn't have a lot of this stuff. I mean, we had books on tape, remember, right? That like only old people listen to on road trips, And so I think that might be part of it is like we didn't grow up with all of these different varieties of books, but they're there. And there's a little bit of maybe snobbery or unintentional classifying, ranking of reading materials and what counts and what doesn't. If it's a story with really engaging plot lines and scenery and language, all of that stuff counts. I mean, I've talked before about the fact that my youngest wanted to be read to. This would have been your idea of hell, Amanda, since you don't like read aloud. Sorry. He wanted to be read to all day, every day. And I had 3 kids under 4. So, at that point he was like 2. So I would have had a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 5-year-old. And I was working still at that time, full time outside of the home. Like, I love you and I would love to develop you and enrich you in every way humanly possible. But like, I just cannot read to you all day long. Like at some point we need to eat and I have to do a load of laundry and like I have to go to work and all that stuff. And so we tossed him audiobooks when he was like 2 years old. And he was listening to audiobooks that were meant for lower elementary because he wanted these really rich stories. And to this day, I think it's part of what delayed him, quote unquote, as a reader was because he was listening to like Percy Jackson at the age of 2 and 3 years old. And then all of a sudden we handed him like Bob books and Biscuit Goes to School. And he was like, freaking Biscuit, what is this? Like, he was like, this is so boring. If I'm listening, I can listen to these amazing stories with fantasy worlds and deep characters and big words and all that. And the kid's vocabulary is off the freaking charts and always has been. And not only does he have the big words, but he knows how to use them correctly and in context because of the amount of reading that he's done. So the benefit was there. It's all there. And so, yeah, it counts.
Yeah, you mentioned that. It makes me laugh because, man, it was not that long ago, what, like 8 years? So, I mean, we're not talking when this was still a thing. We straight up went on to Marketplace, maybe. We might have had to hit up eBay. We bought a Discman so that my kiddo could listen to, because the audiobooks that were easy to just hand him without having to give him a cell phone or a device because we were pretty low screen at that time. But he was little and we were doing these big road trips, like 20 to 25 hours straight through to go see my parents. So we were giving him the audiobooks that like came with the book that you read along with, right? Like when chimed and you turned the page and they were all CDs. And like, how are we gonna like in the car? I'm not listening to these like children's books for the entire ride. And he could just listen to the same one over and over and over. Like I said, he loved turning the pages himself and looking at the things and listening and like, we got to make this work. So yeah, we straight up found an old school Discman and like, here you go. It's like learning to not jostle it was probably the biggest thing that we had to teach him because Discmans, even when they were brand new, they weren't great. When they were 20 years old, it was less ideal.
When the batteries are dying and all of a sudden the story is like, he entered the room.
Yeah.
Mom, I need some double A's. Oh my gosh, that's great. Well, and there's a great example. I have kids. I only have one kid who can read in the car. The other 2, including myself, would be like vomiting on the side of the road if any of us even tried it. We were in an Uber the other day and there was a screen on the back of the headrest and it had trivia questions on it.
Oh,
I was like, don't do the trivia. You'll make yourself throw up. Don't do the trivia. And I was like, but then the first question was there and I knew the answer. And I was like, but I know the answer. And I did the trivia and I totally wanted to throw. I felt so sick. So
Uh-huh.
it's like, I mean, if you have a kid who can't read in the car, an audiobook is a great way of getting around that. And that is reading. It's the same thing as having a disability outside of a car that would preclude you from being able to read a physical book. Same difference, just in the car. So yeah. You brought up too the concept of rereading books. I have two kids in particular who love to reread books, right?
Mhm.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there's comfort in doing that. I don't reread to the same extent that my kids do, but I've definitely reread a couple of like my all-time favorites more than once and still cried, even though I knew what was going to happen. I've still cried like on the rereads. But yeah, I mean, it's fine whether it's a reread, whether it's reading aloud together, shared reading where you're passing a book around, all of it counts. It's all reading.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. And I had kind of mentioned before a podcast. And for those who are like, I don't think a podcast counts as reading, I would encourage you to think about some of the podcasts like we've talked about it before, revisionist history. Malcolm Gladwell, he has put out a ton of books, and his revisionist history podcast feels very much like a chapter from one of his books. Very similar kind of thing. If you've got younger kiddos or kids who want something that's a little bit more fun and silly, Wow in the World, they put out books that are basically just transcripts of their podcast. If they can make a book out of it and make money selling a paperback book, your kiddo can get the exact same thing out of listening to the podcast. They're still getting the vocabulary, they're getting the ideas, they're getting the practice with the critical thinking and the listening and following along with the story. Those are all skills that are happening, whether they're reading it on paper or they're listening to it in the podcast.
Yeah, and I think some of us have this thing like it was a thing in my household, or at least my parents tried to make it a thing. I wasn't a reader, but this like, going to bed at night and that was your wind down was to get in
Mhm.
bed with a book and you're all cozy and whatever. And so I think sometimes we have that vision in our head like that is reading, right? But the reality is it doesn't have to be. I mean, you can make reading feel cozy and comfortable and create that warm fuzzy feeling that maybe you have attachment to in any other way. I mean, that might look like a fort in your living room or a hammock in the backyard. It's summertime in the Northern Hemisphere. Get outside, get a hammock going. Maybe it's snacks. Maybe it's whenever it's reading time, it's like bowl of popcorn or a cup of tea or something like that. You could become those poetry tea time people. I'm guessing that's never been you, Amanda. Right, it's definitely never been us. I am not a lover of poetry. I'm like, just say whatever you're trying to say. I don't need symbolism. The vase doesn't need to represent all of life. Just say what you would like to say. Okay. This isn't a puzzle. I
And
can't stand it.
I do like poetry.
Oh,
Um,
can't stand it.
my kiddo's just been reading. I recently gave him Where the Sidewalk Ends,
Oh, I do
which
like
is,
those.
that like a whole book of poetry, and he's super into it, which has made me really happy because I remember being in elementary school and like loving that book. And my mom is not into poetry, so she was not about to buy me that book, but she was happy to send me to the library. And I think I checked that book out like almost back to back for months. I don't, yeah.
I do like those. Yeah, I like a good Shel Silverstein poem. Yeah, so I mean, you can create an association where reading feels good, whether that's the lighting, whether it's the atmosphere in the house, whether it's quiet. I have a kid, my youngest kiddo, when he was still reading physical books, the only way he could read a book was with EDM music that made me want to have a seizure playing. Like it was so horrendous, but that's the level of sensory input that he needs all the time is like 17 sources of input coming at him. And I'm like, I could not read. I'd read the same sentence for 7 straight hours and still not know what I read if I had that much music going on in the background. But for him, it works. That's the thing that allows him to focus. So for us, I think sometimes we have to kind of get out of the way and be like, if that's what's working for you, have the best time ever. That would never work for me.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's so much of it, right? Like, not always, but a lot of the times, if you have a kiddo who swears that they don't like reading, it's probably that they don't like the very narrow definition of reading that you have set up or constructed or that they have been told they had to operate within. So, get creative. Think about other options and what it can look like that would make it more enjoyable for everyone involved.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was the types of books too, right? Like My Antonia. Why is that still being assigned? Lord of the Flies. Stop it. Okay. I don't care what they're reading. Just let them read something, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
maybe I don't know that your 5-year-old needs to read like 50 Shades of Grey, but like you get what I'm saying, right? Like whatever the content is that if they only like mysteries, let them read mysteries. If they only like adventure, they only like sci-fi, they only like fantasy, they only like whatever, let them read it. Who cares? I don't care if it's one dimensional. Let them read it. I'm a grown up. I only read historical fiction unless we're reading for book club. So and sometimes it depends on how good my book is. Like I like our book club books, but if my book is really good, I don't want to read the book club book. I want to read
Mhm.
my book. But I'm 44 years old. If somebody said to me like reading historical fiction all the time is not going to make you well-rounded, I'd be like, fuck off. But our kids can't do that, right? But they're the same as if they really like sci-fi and that's all they want to read, they're just mini adults. They should have that autonomy to be able to read what they want to read.
Yeah. No, for sure. Absolutely. And going along with that, if you're trying to build an interest, not even a love of reading, but just you're trying to get that spark going, offer alternatives while you build this trust, while you build this relationship that's a partnership with your kiddo. So, again, let them listen to the audiobooks or podcasts related to the same themes you're exploring or their favorite hobby. There are tons of fun, silly podcasts out there. Go set them free. Let them enjoy those things. It's the best kind of gateway drug. Pair books with movies, activities, or field trips. A lot of kids will enjoy reading an easy book or listening to the audiobook of an easy one and then watching the movie version and pointing out all of the ways that they did it wrong. Go for it. Okay? Go for it. Let them see reading as one of the many valid ways to learn, right? Not the only one, but one of many. It's truly, again, this is one of those things. It's a data point. It's a piece of the puzzle. It's not the whole puzzle.
I have a Facebook memory that pops up every year. It was from the early time of the pandemic, so probably like April-ish of 2020. And we set up what we called cinema quarantine and we pulled some like throwbacks and whatever. And Liam had finished reading The Wizard of Oz, which is one of his favorite books. And I decided, let's watch the movie, right? And I literally posted on Facebook. It was like, if anyone would like to spend approximately 2 hours listening to how the movie differs from the book, and come on over. It's mind numbing. I think it took us like 5 hours to get through it because he kept pausing it and being like, now this is not how it went. It was brutal, but he had the best time ever.
Yeah. I too have a kiddo who very much enjoys pointing out all of the ways they failed to make a movie adaptation of a book. So if you've got that kiddo, you might have to prepare yourself for that day. But it's a great thing for them if you've got the kiddo who likes to be critical about those things or likes to notice and point those things out. Encourage it. There are lots of poorly made book to movie adaptations out there and a few that go the other way, right? So interesting to try both ways.
Okay, so let's wrap up with just kind of like a rapid fire, ancillary topics related to reading. And we might be quite different on these. So last week or the week before, I forget, we did an episode of Keep or Toss. What are we going to keep from the public school system versus toss? So I thought it might be kind of fun to do the same. So reading logs, Amanda, keep or toss?
Uh, Keep if they work.
That's a good way of looking at it, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it works. And generally for us, it's a toss. We just read for the love of reading. We don't
Mhm.
we don't log things, we don't chart things, whatever. If you live in a state that requires you to turn something in, I'm looking at you like Vermont, New York, Pennsylvania. Ugh, I'm sorry, I can't with those rules. If you're required to turn, you can do it on the secret, right? Like you don't have to. Your kid doesn't have to know that it's happening for it to happen. So if it's not working for your kiddo, but you need to keep it for regulations, do it secretly. It's all good. But yeah, if your kid likes it, then do
Yeah.
it.
Or I know in our house, especially when my kiddo was younger and writing was not something that was easy for him, and he really struggled with handwriting. this was an easy way to have him practice almost daily handwriting without him realizing that he was practicing handwriting. So he would fill out the reading log of the title, the author, how many pages, and then, it was one of those that had the little like color in however many stars you would give this book. But he was just writing those down, keeping track of whichever books we were returning to the library. Then we'd kind of cross check it with the library list to make sure that we weren't keeping things for months longer than we were supposed to. And so, like, it was all kind of wrapped up in this. And so I knew he was practicing writing his numbers and his alphabet on a regular basis without it being the drudgery associated with having to do like actual written work. So there, you might, right? If your kiddo isn't opposed to it, it might be one way to kind of generally work that in. But again, if it's creating problems, there's what do reading logs do for you, especially if it's creating like a point of contention?
Yeah, because I could see the opposite being true. Like, I'm glad it works for your kiddo, but I could see
Mhm.
the opposite of being like, oh, when I finish this book, I gotta freaking write it down. And if handwriting is a problem,
Yeah.
right? Or if it's the motor skills or whatever the case might be, I could see that negativity bleeding over into the reading. So
Yeah. I
for
mean,
others, that might be an issue. So just be super, like it worked in your case, but I could see that being an issue,
that's it. I
a
mean,
negative association with something that you're trying to have be a positive association.
absolutely. It can go either way. It can be a mindless way that they don't even realize they're practicing and they don't care doing it, or it could become, a real a block. So just again,
Mhm.
this was not a good keep or toss. We're talking way too much. Okay, next one. Book reports, keep or toss.
Oh, 100% toss from me. Like 100%. I think we've talked about the fact I'm totally about practicing writing and making sure that you are a good written skills communicator. But I think turning reading into work in our house is not a thing. So we read for the joy and love of reading. We talk about our books. If I ever had a kid who wanted to like write a review for a book on like Goodreads or something, great, have the time of your life. But I would never require a book report in 1,000,001 years.
Okay. I would toss them. We tried them. They were not a good time. Even the ones that were just, like draw a picture from it, write out who the main characters were, whatever. Like it was, again, a source of contention in our home. So it didn't get us what we wanted. That said, we do novel studies that involve a lot of analyzing of each chapter and then kind of like a general write up about something at the end of the book. And I'm pro that, but like an actual book report, especially for younger kids, there are a million and one templates out there. Teachers Pay Teachers is full of like book reports for first graders, book reports for second graders, book reports for third graders. Like I tried it, been there, done that. I'm the curriculum person, tried it. It was awful. I wasted a lot of paper and we butted heads a lot. Like, so yeah, definitely a toss.
You may or may not know that the fabulous Pizza Hut Book It program of our childhoods is still a thing. It still exists, and homeschoolers are
Super
eligible.
easy. Yeah, super easy for
Yeah,
homeschoolers. Yep.
exactly. So Pizza Hut Book It, keep or toss. Are you in the Book It? I mean, your kid would be like, all he would eat was pizza.
I mean, in many ways. So I would keep it. We aren't currently doing it because yes, we did do it and we had so many stupid pizzas that we haven't done it in a while. But I think it's fun. I know the memes go around about being like food motivated and all of those kinds of things, whatever. I'm all about a free pizza. So
Yeah, because it was a whole experience when we were kids too, because they had like the eat-in Pizza Huts that looked like a hut, and they had
mhm.
video games, and while you waited for your pizza, you could play video games and whatever. It was a whole thing.
Yep.
Yeah, so we get them. I typically don't tie it as a 1-to-1 to books or even like a 10-to-1 or like read 10 and you get a pizza because my kids are just always reading. So for me, it goes into incentives and charting and all that. And we don't do any of that kind of stuff, but it's just one of these things like because you're a bookworm, Pizza Hut loves you and you get a pizza. So it would be like on the way home from swim practice or whatever, we'd grab a pizza. And they knew it was because they were bookworms and Pizza Hut sends out coupons to bookworms. So we ran it our own way.
Mhm.
But yeah, because I'm not a carrot and stick person. So I had to kind of tweak the program a little bit, but it worked.
All right then. And raise your hand if you're surprised by that answer. We see no one. So how about this one, Megan? Incentive/sticker charts, etc.
I mean, I think your answer from before, like if that's the thing that works for your kid. My youngest kid went to summer camp when we lived in North Carolina and it was at the YMCA. I know, religion, etc. It was the freaking Bible Belt. It was the least religious program I could find. but they used to have these pipe cleaner bracelet things that they would do, and they would get beads for like doing kind things, right? Or like if they got spotted reapplying their sunscreen, they'd get a bead or whatever. And it's so weird because I'm not an incentive chart person or a carrot and stick person, but he quite liked getting beads at camp, right? Like that was like he found that fun when he was at camp. It never spilled over into anything else in our life. It was like reserved at camp. But yeah, I mean, he liked it. So if you feel like that's a thing that's going to work for your kid, I say do it. For us, it's not a thing. And I don't love the carrot and stick piece of anything. But yeah, I mean, if it's working and if that's what's happening in your house, have the best time ever. What about you?
Yeah, the same. I don't do it personally. It's too much work and effort in my world to keep track of all of that. But my kiddo does love an incentive or a freebie, right? Like he does the library reading program where he gets the free stuff. He's just started the Mensa book list that you get like the free t-shirt after you've read all of the books on the book list. He's all about anything like that. He absolutely loves the Barnes and Noble, read so many books and then get a free book from Barnes and Noble. Like, but in our own home, we don't do it and we don't have any issues. We're not in a position where we need to achieve what we want. But if you are, if your kiddo, you feel like that will really help, then I mean, I don't necessarily see the harm in it.
Yeah, it could work. Might be just the thing that works for you. Yeah. All right.
All right. So we're almost done. We have a mantra for you still because we never wrap up an episode without a mantra.
Hopefully, you've gotten some good ideas today, even though we do have readers. Speaking of books, wanted to just raise a little flag and let you know that I've talked before in the podcast about the fact that I lead book clubs. It is coming up on registration time for the remainder of 2025. So I have a summer book club where we're doing Resistance Women, and I won't talk for 5 minutes about this book. All I will say is it is amazing. I've read it multiple times. I've covered it with teenagers before. It is freaking amazing. It's historical fiction. Don't let the title Resistance Women scare you off if your child is not gendered as a female. It's amazing for all. It's based on the true story of a resistance cell that operated in Nazi Germany from 1929 to the late 30s. And you know that thing where people are like, why didn't anybody stand up? Why didn't anybody try to stop this? Or how did he get all of these people to go along with his thing? This is this book that over the course of a decade looks at the dismantling of democracy in Germany, but through novel form. And you see who stood up and why it didn't work and all of that. And it's just very timely given what's going on in the United States today.
Yeah.
So it's for mature readers. It's a high school teenager level class, but I'll have it on Outschool over the summer. Amazing. And then in the fall, I have a book club called Historical Heroines, and we read historical fiction books, and they all have strong female leads. Again, all genders are welcome. I have a ton of kids in that group that have been with me for 4 or 5 years, but then we always welcome new friends and we love them. And so I haven't picked all of the books for fall yet. I know we're going to be reading one book about suffrage, and then Jennifer M. Nielsen has a new book coming out, and we always read her new book when it comes out because my regular students love her. But we come together. It's a fairly relaxed book club in the sense we read about 80 to 90 pages a week. We show up, we talk about what characters we love, what characters we don't love. We talk about what we think might happen. We talk about the writing style. It's a fun, organic book club where we come together and hang out. So I'll put some links in the show notes below if you're interested in having your kiddo join me. It's all through Outschool. I'll put a coupon code too. If you're new to Outschool, you can use that. But yeah, it's a fun way to make reading amazing. So if anybody's interested, come hang out with me. It'll be super fun, but it's definitely registration time for the remainder of 2025.
Nice. Nice. All right. So, like I said, always have a mantra for you to wrap up and end the Tuesday discussion. So this week's mantra is not every kid is born clutching a library card, and that's okay. Ditch the guilt, focus on incremental growth, and remember, your kid's worth isn't measured in pages per day.
It most definitely is not. Or to your point, Amanda, should not be, right?
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We had an awesome time chatting, and hopefully you got some useful things out of it and you're feeling ready to go really think through some things and come up with some new ideas and try some new stuff. And if you've got other questions, reach out to us. We're happy to answer and help out.
Yeah. Have an awesome day and happy homeschooling.
Yeah, have a great one.